The courtroom was silent. Not the kind of silence that comes before a verdict. This was different. The judge sat forward in his chair, hands folded on the bench, staring down at a man in an orange jumpsuit. 12 seconds passed. No one moved. The man in orange didn't look up. He didn't need to. He already knew. What happens in those 12 seconds changes everything that comes after. Not because of what was said, because of what wasn't. The man's name was Michael. He was 41 years old. He had a daughter who wrote him letters every month, even though he never wrote back. Before this moment, he'd spent 6 years in county jail waiting for trial. 6 years in a place designed to hold people for 6 months. The walls were cinder block. The toilets didn't have seats. At night, the fluorescent lights never shut off completely. They just dimmed to a hum that made it hard to think. Michael's lawyer told him to expect 12 to 15 years. Maybe less with good behavior. The prosecutor mentioned 20. But when the judge paused like that, Michael felt something shift in his chest. It wasn't fear exactly. It was recognition. Courtrooms operate on rhythm. Judges speak, lawyers object, clerks type. There's a cadence to it. When that rhythm breaks, everyone in the room feels it. The 12 seconds weren't dramatic. They were administrative. The judge was reading something on his screen. But Michael had learned to read silence the way some people read faces. And this silence had weight. When the judge finally spoke, his voice was steady. 35 years. No parole eligibility for 28. Michael's lawyer stood up to say something, but Michael put a hand on his arm. It was over. What most people don't understand about sentencing is that the moment itself is almost irrelevant. The real consequence begins in the hours after. When the marshal takes you through a door the public can't see. When they process you into a holding cell with 7 other men who've just been sentenced. No one speaks. Everyone knows the math they're doing in their heads. Subtracting years from their lives. Calculating how old they'll be. Whether their parents will still be alive. Whether their children will remember them. Michael sat on a steel bench bolted to the wall. His hands were cuffed behind him. A man across from him kept whispering the same number over and over. 62. 62. That's how old he'd be when he got out. Michael didn't say his number out loud. He didn't need to. 69. If he lived that long. They moved him that night. Not to the prison. Sentencing doesn't work like that. Back to county. Back to the pod where he'd spent 6 years. The same bunk. The same cellmate. A kid named Devin who'd been waiting for trial almost as long. Devin didn't ask what happened. He didn't have to. Michael sat on his bunk and stared at the wall. 3 days later, they woke him at 4 a.m. This time it was real. Transport. They shackled his ankles and wrists to a chain around his waist. Put him on a bus with 40 other men. Some of them were going to medium security. Some to maximum. No one told you which. You figured it out when the bus stopped. The ride took 11 hours. They didn't stop for food. There was a toilet in the back of the bus. No door, just a hole. Most men held it as long as they could. Michael watched the landscape change through a window reinforced with wire mesh. Farmland. Mountains. Towns he'd never heard of. He tried to remember the last time he'd been outside for more than an hour. He couldn't. When the bus finally stopped, the air smelled different. Thinner. Colder. They unloaded them in a Sally Port, a garage with 2 gates, one in front, one behind. Both locked. A guard walked down the aisle of the bus with a clipboard, calling names. When he called Michael's, he added a number. Medium. Cell block D. Some men relaxed when they heard medium. Others tensed. It depended on what you'd heard. What stories traveled. Michael had heard that D block was old. Built in the 70s. 6 tiers. 200 men per tier. 1 guard station at the center. The kind of place where things happened slowly, quietly, and no one talked about it after. They stripped him in a processing room. Told him to squat and cough. Gave him 2 sets of clothes, 2 sheets, a blanket, a toothbrush, and a bar of soap. Everything beige or gray. Then they walked him through a corridor that echoed with metal doors and voices layered on top of each other. None of them distinct. All of them human. The cell was 7 by 10. A bunk bed, a toilet, a sink, a desk bolted to the wall. His cellmate was already there. An older man, maybe 60, sitting on the bottom bunk reading a book with no cover. He looked up when Michael came in, nodded once, and went back to reading. Michael climbed onto the top bunk and lay on his back. The ceiling was stained brown in one corner. Water damage, maybe, or something else. He didn't sleep that night. Most people don't their first night. There's a soundscape to prison that takes time to decode. Doors slamming on timers. Radios playing through vents. Men talking to each other between cells and voices just low enough that you can't make out the words, only the tone. Footsteps. Keys. The hiss of a toilet flushing 4 cells down. Michael's cellmate's name was Raymond. He'd been in for 19 years. Armed robbery. He didn't talk much, but he explained the basics. When to line up for meals. How to avoid certain areas of the yard. Which guards to trust, which to avoid. He said it casually, the way someone might explain how to use a coffee maker. No emotion, just information. The first week is about learning the architecture. Not the physical kind, the social kind. Every prison has a structure you can't see, but everyone obeys. Who sits where in the chow hall? Who controls which phones? Who you make eye contact with and who you don't. Michael watched. He'd learned to do that in county. Keep your head down, but not too far down. Respond when spoken to, but don't initiate. Exist without taking up space. On his 5th day, someone asked him what he was in for. It's the question everyone asks, but how you answer matters. Michael said it plainly. No emotion. No excuses. The man nodded and walked away. That was the test. If you lie, people find out. If you over-explain, they think you're weak. If you say nothing, they think you're hiding something worse. Raymond told him that night that he'd done well. People are watching, he said. Always. Even when it feels like they're not. Michael started working in the kitchen after 2 weeks. Most people wanted yard time or library access, so kitchen work went to whoever asked. It paid 27 cents an hour. He woke at 4:30 a.m., prepped food until 10, cleaned until noon. The work was repetitive. Cutting vegetables, scrubbing steel trays, mopping floors that never stayed clean. But it gave him something to do, and it meant he could eat a little better. The cooks always saved the less terrible food for themselves. There was a man in the kitchen named Leon who'd been down for 32 years. He had a scar that ran from his temple to his jaw and hands that shook when he held a knife. But he could dice an onion faster than anyone Michael had ever seen. Leon didn't talk about his case. He talked about his grandson, who was 6 years old and liked dinosaurs. Leon had never met him in person, only through pictures his daughter sent. He kept them in a plastic sleeve tucked inside his waistband. One morning, Leon didn't show up for work. No one said why. The guards replaced him with someone else by lunch. Michael asked Raymond what happened. Raymond said Leon had a stroke in his cell. They took him to medical. He died 2 days later. No one made an announcement. His bunk was filled by the end of the week. Michael thought about that a lot. How quickly a person could be replaced. How little noise it made. The months stacked into a year. Then 2. Michael stopped counting days and started counting seasons. Winter meant cold cells and fights over hot water. Summer meant sweat that never dried and tempers that flared over nothing. Spring and fall were easier. Quieter. His daughter stopped writing after the 3rd year. He didn't blame her. He'd told her not to wait for him. Told her to live her life. But when the letters stopped, he felt it. A small absence that grew heavier over time. Raymond was released in Michael's 4th year. They didn't say goodbye. That's not how it works. One morning Raymond's bunk was empty, his belongings gone. A new cellmate arrived that afternoon. Younger. Angrier. He lasted 2 months before he got into a fight and was moved to segregation. Michael requested a single cell after that. It took 6 months to get approved, but when it did, he felt something close to relief. Being alone is different than being lonely. Michael learned the distinction. Alone, he could think. He could read. He could write letters he never sent. Lonely was what happened in crowds. In the chow hall. In the yard. Surrounded by people, but unable to connect to any of them in a way that mattered. Some men adapted by forgetting who they were before. They built new identities inside. New families. New purposes. Michael couldn't do that. He carried his old life with him like a stone in his pocket. It wore him down, but he couldn't let it go. There are moments in prison that remind you you're still human. A guard who says good morning and means it. A letter from someone you didn't expect. A meal that tastes like something your mother used to make. These moments are small, but they matter. They're what you hold on to when the weight gets too heavy. Michael had one of those moments in his 7th year. A new chaplain started visiting the block. He wasn't there to convert anyone. He just walked the tiers, talking to whoever wanted to talk. Michael didn't want to. But one day the chaplain sat down next to him in the day room and didn't say anything. Just sat. After a few minutes, Michael started talking. He didn't plan to. It just came out. About his daughter. About the 12 seconds. About how much time felt different inside. How it stretched and compressed in ways that didn't make sense. The chaplain listened. When Michael finished, the chaplain said, "You're still here. That means something." Michael didn't know if he believed that, but he thought about it. The years continued. Guards rotated in and out. Inmates came and went. The building aged. Paint peeled. Pipes leaked. The same fluorescent lights that hummed in county hummed here too. Michael's hair went gray. His knees started to hurt when he climbed the stairs to his tier. He developed a cough that wouldn't go away. Medical gave him cough drops. He thought sometimes about the judge. Whether he remembered that day. Whether he remembered the 12 seconds. Michael didn't think he did. For the judge, it was a Tuesday. One sentencing among hundreds. For Michael, it was the moment his life split into before and after. Some people say the system is broken. Others say it works exactly as intended. Michael didn't have an opinion anymore. He was inside it. Opinions were for people on the outside. What he didn't know was this. Time in prison doesn't rehabilitate. It warehouses. It ages you faster than the calendar suggests. It takes pieces of you so slowly you don't notice until you look back and realize how much is gone. He's still there. 17 years in. 11 to go. If everything goes perfectly. If he stays healthy. If he doesn't make a mistake. If the parole board sees something in him worth releasing. His daughter has a daughter now. Michael is a grandfather. He knows this because his sister sent him a picture. The baby has his eyes. He keeps the picture on the wall above his desk, next to the mirror. Some mornings he looks at it and feels something. Other mornings, he doesn't feel anything at all. The 12 seconds are still there. They don't fade. They replay in his mind sometimes, late at night, when the block finally goes quiet. He wonders what the judge was thinking, what he was reading on that screen, whether it mattered. He wonders if anyone thinks about the distance between a courtroom and a cell, between a decision and a life, between 12 seconds and 17 years. He doesn't have an answer. Neither does anyone else.